The larger issue, which I think is even more damaging than what the damage that Donald Trump is doing to the environment, it's even more damaging than Donald Trump putting children in cages. I should say Trump and Pence, really, putting children in cages. It's more damaging than the whack-a-mole, insane trade stuff that he's doing with the trade war that's threatening to destabilize literally the entire world economy, because he's doing it in this helter-skelter fashion of using emergency presidential directives rather than trying to have Congress officially change our trade policies to more reasonable ones. All of those things are insanely destructive. But the biggest legacy of this administration is all of this. It's not even all of this corruption in aggregate. It's the fact that we have tolerated all of this corruption in aggregate. There is not a single voice in the Republican Party outside of Justin Amash in Michigan who's probably going to go bye-bye in the next election. We did have, Bob Corker and Jeff Flake, before the last election, but they said, hey, when they spoke out against Trump, the base turned against them, and they just, they had to leave. So there are no Republicans who are speaking out against this corruption. And the American public, by and large, doesn't seem to be all that incensed about it. I mean, certainly Democrats are pretty outraged, and the Democratic base is outraged, but that's maybe 30% of America. And out of that 30% of America, it's really probably the 15% who are paying attention right now. So here's what I think is the biggest danger, the single biggest danger of the entire Trump administration. It is that future presidents, future members of the House and Senate, future governors, future members of state houses and Senate and assemblies and whatever it may be called in your particular state, that future politicians are looking around right now, particularly Republican politicians, are looking around right now and saying, holy cow, you can get away with being corrupt. You can get away with doing things by executive order that are, if not illegal, certainly marginal. You can get away with asking for foreign help to get yourself elected. You can get away with skimming billionaires and corporate money through things like, inaugural committees into your own pocket. You can get away with having government support your own business. You can get away with trashing the press. You can get away with all this stuff. I think the biggest damage, what Donald Trump is doing right now is he's running this country like a banana republic. He's running the, and this is saying to future politicians, be they on the right or the left, right? Duterte in the Philippines comes in and he says, I'm going to do just like Donald Trump. I'm going to get rich. I'm going to trash my opponents. I'm going to intimidate the media. And he's doing it on the right. Maduro is doing the same thing in Venezuela on the left. I mean, it pretty much doesn't matter if a politician believes that they live in a consequence-free zone. And more importantly, if the people who work for the politician think they live in a consequence-free zone. The press secretary who hasn't held a press conference in 6 months. I mean, this has never happened to the best of my knowledge, certainly in the era of television. The Treasury Secretary lying through his teeth about numerous things. It just goes on and on. You've got all of these enablers. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration coming out and saying, oh no, Donald Trump is right, when he's wrong, when he's lying through his teeth. I think, frankly, I watched it in real time, when Trump said he had the map up there and he said, this is going to hit Alabama. And I turned to Louise. I mean, we were literally watching it live on television when it happened. And I turned to Louise and I said, he meant Georgia. Because at that point in time, the path looked like, the hurricane was going to turn north on Florida and go up past Georgia. And there's this little piece of Georgia right north of Florida, and it was right there in the head of the cone. And I said, he meant Georgia. He said Alabama. He misspoke. Or he doesn't know the geography of the South well enough to know which one is Alabama and which one is Georgia. But now he's got officials lying about this. So what this says to a future president, whether it's a liberal or a conservative, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican or something in between or something that comes out of, the implosion of the Republican Party, whatever it may be, I think the lasting and most dangerous legacy of Donald Trump is not the fact that he was corrupt. It's not the fact that he put cronies, in his cabinet, like, Wilbur Ross, the guy who was co-owner of a bank that used to, an offshore bank that launders money for billionaires, or Betsy DeVos, who has spent her life and career trying to destroy public education, putting her in charge of education, or putting anti-labor people in charge of the Labor Department. I mean, like I said, coal lobbyists in charge of the EPA and oil lobbyists in charge of Interior. That's not his most lasting legacy. Actually, frankly, Reagan did some of those things, although he didn't do them quite as blatantly and quite as corruptly. The lasting legacy is if we don't push back, if we don't hold him accountable, if we don't not only impeach him, but the people who have gone along with this. If we don't subject them to some kind of penalty, whether it's criminal penalties or whether it's a Truth and Reconciliation Committee or public shaming or congressional hearings or something, then future presidents are going to continue to be able to enlist underlings to break the laws for them. We certainly saw this in the Reagan administration. It was Bill Barr in 1992 who had George Herbert Walker Bush pardon 5 people, including Ollie North and Elliott Abrams, pardon 5 people who were involved in Iran-Contra. In Ronald Reagan's corrupt deal to have the Iranians hold the hostages so Jimmy Carter would lose the election. I mean, this has been going on for a while. You could say that the Trump administration is the logical outcome of Richard Nixon blowing up LBJ's peace talks with Vietnam so he could get himself elected in 1968. It is the logical extension of Ronald Reagan intervening with Iran and sending them weapons. I mean, even before the election, he was transshipping spare tires to Iran via Israel as part of a deal to have Iran hold the hostages. President Bonnie Sauter's on the record about this. Just Google Bonnie Sauter and Christian Science Monitor. You'll see the whole thing. I mean, he just lays it out. You could say that Trump's corruption is the legacy of Nixon's corruption and Reagan's corruption, and then George Herbert Walker Bush. He's got a couple of cronies on the Supreme Court, and in 2000 they decide to violate the 10th Amendment and say, no, we're not going to let the states decide. The Florida State Supreme Court said, let's count every single vote in Florida. Well, everybody knew if every single vote in Florida was actually counted, Al Gore won the election. And in fact, a year later, that's what we found actually happened. But Bush Sr. leans on his buddies on the Supreme Court, and they say, oh, we're going to stop the count in Florida and give the presidency to George W. Bush, to daddy's son. And this kind of corruption, these relatively singular incidents of corruption or even treason, none of them were punished. No one was held accountable for any of these. And pretty much everybody got away with it. And so, of course, Trump thinks he's going to get away with it too. I think we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we need criminal accountability for these guys they're taking down our republic. They're destroying our country right in front of us.